So I want to just thank everyone for joining us tonight, and I want to thank Leah for being here today. And tonight, this is our first of our Hobart William Smith speaker series, and we are going to have Leah Shafer here. She's the Associate Professor of Media and Society at Hobart William Smith, and she will be talking about internet memes, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I will turn it over to her to get started.
Thank you, Alexis. I'm really happy to be here through the Wood Library tonight. Excited to see folks appearing. I'm really loving the way that the pandemic is giving us this opportunity to communicate with each other across different spaces and to share ideas in a way that maybe I wouldn't be driving up to Canandaigua on a Wednesday night. So I'm happy to be here, excited to talk with folks. I have a slideshow that I'll be showing while I talk. So I'm just going to start up with that so folks can see what I'm talking about. So this is my title slide. As Alexis was just saying, the talk is memes, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm really going to be focusing mostly on the good. I spent a lot of time thinking about what was right for this moment in time, and I have a history of writing about a bunch of different kinds of memes, and the one that I started out with was cat videos. So I thought I would sort of focus a little bit on cat videos tonight, but I will talk a little bit about a few other things. So some of the things that I mentioned in the blurb that I wrote for this talk, a little bit about why are memes popular, what is a meme, and more than that, the ways that internet culture and meme culture have come together. And so that's sort of where the bad and the ugly come in. I'll talk a little bit at the end about the rise of alt-right memes and the way that that is a part of internet culture. But mostly I think I'm going to focus on cat videos because we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Let's make ourselves feel good, which is really one of the functions of the cat video. So as Alexis said, my name is Leah Shafer. I am an associate professor and chair of the Media and Society program. Media and Society is a great place to work because our program really focuses both on film, television, and new media, and the way that it interacts with culture. So the talk I'm giving tonight is very much in line with the kind of things that I teach about. Very briefly, a little bit about me. As an undergraduate, I studied theater and comparative literature and art history. So my work really comes from that background, thinking about the phenomena of performance, of art, of the way that people interact with these things. That's where I come from. So Media and Society was a really good fit for me. My graduate work was in film studies. So the way that I come to new media study when I first started teaching at Hobart and William Smith was how do I bring what I've learned from film studies to studying phenomena that exist on the internet? And that is how I came to working on memes, thinking about that sort of combination of where does contemporary art practice and public art interact with commerce on the internet and the way that people live their lives through new media. So that is where I came from. The themes that I tend to talk a lot about are repetition as a kind of art practice, the way that culture and art interact with each other. And so memes are really a great example of this. So what am I going to talk to you about tonight? I'm going to start out with sort of what is a meme. And I'm going to be talking specifically about one example, which is called the Nyan Cat. And I'm going to use that as the sort of primary example to talk about a meme. And then I'm going to give a little bit of a history of some important memes, but there's so many of them, there's no way I could really do a comprehensive job on that. So that's how I'm going to be sort of starting out giving you a few examples so you can get a sense of how memes developed from the early days of memes on the internet to now. Then I'm going to talk specifically about cat videos. And then, as I said, I'll give a little bit of attention to internet culture writ large, the way that memes have been an example of the rise of alt-right content online. And then when we wrap up, we're going to just watch some cat videos together. And depending on how long the rest of this takes, we will definitely have time for Q&A at the end. And we'll see where we are when we get to the cat videos. I've got like a 10-minute compilation. So we'll see how much of that we watch. All right, so I want to chat first a little bit about what is a meme. This is an image of Richard Dawkins. He wrote a book in the 1970s called The Selfish Gene. And the idea behind his book was to figure out why some behaviors from an evolutionary perspective seem to make no sense, but somehow or other were found to be very common in human societies. So he wondered, when observing behavior among humans, whether any similar process could be at work to explain why some ideas, which on the face of them seem injurious to those who hold them, continue to persist and proliferate. So he really thought about different things that people did that didn't necessarily work for them, but they kept doing them, and throughout time, people kept doing these things. So he was able to find examples of this that exist throughout history. So he tried to figure out, what is it about those particular kinds of ideas that allowed them to continue to spread, even though they didn't seem to have a sort of evolutionary need? There wasn't an evolutionary need for those things. And so he decided that there was a kind of natural selection process for ideas. And so he called that a meme, which comes from the Greek M-I-M-E-M-E. I don't know how to pronounce Greek, so I'm going to say mime, which means imitated thing. And so imitation is a huge part of the way that memes work. So once internet culture starts getting established in the 21st century, scholars start picking up Dawkins' term and relating it to the way that ideas spread across the internet. As a little bit of a side note, there's some distinction between the way that people talk about that kind of spread. Originally, people always called it viral spread. You've probably heard about things going viral. Another scholar, Henry Jenkins, suggests that we should say that things spread. So there's some kind of distinction among scholars about, should we talk about things being viral or things spreading? I tend to use viral, even though I actually think that the theory behind spreading is maybe a little bit better theory, but most people use viral as the term, so that's what I usually talk about. In any case, memes are something that people who are writing about internet culture start talking about. And so one of the first people to publish a book about this is a woman named Leah Shafer, and she wrote a book, Memes in Digital Culture. So I'm just going to borrow a little bit of a summary from Kevin Lewis, who wrote in Digital Humanities Quarterly about her book, to explain the link between what we call memes and Dawkins' original idea. So Dawkins originally started talking about internet memes, and Schiffman says this is actually, memes are the propagation of items such as jokes, rumors, videos, and websites from person to person via the internet. And so one of the things that works about Schiffman's definition is that it's not just one specific type of things spreading, because often when people talk about memes, they're talking about something that's like what you're seeing right now. And that's called an image macro. And an image macro is when you take like one picture and then you have text, usually on the top and the bottom, and that text is commenting on the picture, but it's also sort of being cheeky and sort of juxtaposing what it's saying with what the image is. We'll look at some other examples like this, but here, this is a prime example of the image macro type meme, where it's an image of Richard Dawkins, and then it is that meme language where it says he coined the term meme, and now he is a meme. And so that kind of reflection on what a meme is within a meme is very frequently the way that memes work. So the other thing that I want to just say about Schiffman talking about memes is that she says they have three properties: longevity, So they tend to last a long time. And so my first slide, I'll just return to that for a second, was this Bernie from a few weeks ago, right? And so I don't know how many of you saw this pop up everywhere for like a week. At this point, memes, a lifespan of a meme tends to be fairly short, but I would say this one had some longevity. It also had the other thing that Schiffman says that a meme has to have, which is fecundity. It's got a lot of depth to it. It's got a lot of possibilities within it. It's fecund. It can grow new ideas from its original base. And the last is copying fidelity. So it's something that can be replicated. So that's that is the basic sort of definition of a meme. Now I want to give you a kind of slightly drawn out series of images and videos, because what I personally study for the most part is viral videos, which are memes, and less the sort of image like what we just saw. I'll talk a little bit more about those specific meme images, but I wanted to use the sort of example of the viral video to get us going here. So this image that you're looking at here is called the Nyan Cat, and it is an example of mimetic spread, an example of memes that spread. I want to talk about this first because when I talk about cat videos, I talk a lot in my work about cuteness as an important part of memes. I'm not the only person who talks about that, but that's part of what I talk about. Repetition, the kind of collision of pop art and absurdity. So that's kind of a hallmark of pop art, the sort of art movement from the 1960s through the 1980s. But it also is in memes, that kind of pop art sensibility is sort of mixed with commercial sensibility. Certainly that's also a hallmark of pop art. But here what we're looking at, this also reflects the kind of cultural circulation of the sort of images that are popular on the internet. So this looks like it came from a video game or it was created digitally. It looks a little bit handmade. So it's memes often have a kind of rejection and embrace of mass media styles. So they don't tend to be very slick, but they also tend to sort of reflect the fact that internet art is not always very slick. And they also tend to reflect the idea that an average person made the thing. So memes, in that way, that's another way that they sort of reject mass media style, because mass media is usually sort of top down, right? It's sort of like someone who owns a media company produces a thing, or filmmakers or movie studios or television producers. That's one style. And then there's the handmade style, and memes tend to have a more handmade style. So let's watch, we're not gonna watch the whole thing, it's about 4 minutes long. But this was a video that a user made and put up on the internet, and it became a meme. So this is the Nyan Cat. Okay, so you kind of get the idea. This goes on for about 4 minutes. Now, this very quickly went viral. Oh, sorry, no, it started again. All right, so what's going on in the Nyan Cat? The Nyan Cat is very flat. It is a cat that has the body of a Pop-Tart, and it is flying through space on a rainbow. And so all of these things, when I was talking about pop art, I think this very much reflects that kind of style. It's very flat. It looks like a video game. It has that incredibly repetitive song. Frankly, it will get in your head. I feel a little bit bad about playing all these examples for everyone tonight because you're going to be stuck with it. And I have to say, this is my side note here, that when I was preparing for this, I watched it and I was filled with joy. And I thought, this is amazing. This is one of the greatest things that I've ever seen. I can't believe I haven't looked at this for several years. And then I got to this point where I was like, oh my God, I can't listen to this anymore. And every time I would do this, it would be about 1 minute and 40 seconds in. Even though I wasn't looking at the timer, that was apparently my personal limit for how many minutes and seconds that I could watch this video, even though at first I would feel this like great wave of joy. I will say that some people have modified this video, and what we're going to be looking at next is a series of modifications which will allow us to think a little bit about the way that virality works and the way that that kind of fecund copying of the meme functions. So yeah, to get back to what I was just saying, somebody has created like a 10-hour long version of this that people will just play for 10 hours. So, and I'm not doing that. Anyway, this next version, so again, I wanted to show you a few versions of this to talk a little bit about the way that a meme starts out and then gets copied. This next one is very much about the way that memes are often very self-referential. Kind of like this, the thing that this makes me think of is the movement in film history, American film history, called New Cinema. So in the 1970s in the United States, there was a whole new style of filmmaking that film scholars call New Cinema. And it's film that is kind of self-referential. It is film that often films that have scenes in them that sort of refer back to previous scenes from other films. And when scholars write about this, they talk about the fact that by the time we had gotten to the 1970s, filmmakers had had the chance to go to school to learn to be filmmakers. They had had a good 50, 60, 70 years of film history to incorporate into their style. And so that started showing up in the film itself. And so this is what memes do. Memes, it's a much more condensed timeline than the history of American cinema, but the history of internet art and internet commerce is very much about taking what it started with and then sort of doing iterations, doing sort of new repetitions of those things. So in many ways, I like to think of this as a kind of performance of cultural knowledge. And that's one of the ways that we can think about this next example of the Nyan Cat. It sort of functions like the telephone game, right? Where you start out talking about something and then the next person says it differently and then the next person says it differently, but it still carries a seed of the original. The other thing I wanted to say about this, and this is part of the way that I tend to study memes, is I always talk about the way that it functions within culture, right? So again, media and society is the field that I work in. And so I talk a lot about the way that the business of the internet affects these things. So the Nyan Cat comes around right at the moment when YouTube becomes a thing. So YouTube becomes a thing in 2005. And then in 2006, Google purchases YouTube. And then in 2007, people start having iPhones. So all of those sort of industrial changes. Once Google buys YouTube, YouTube becomes sort of imbricated in the sort of economic structure of the way that Google makes money. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And I think it's also important to think about the fact that now, when these images are starting, this is the moment when people start to have more and more access to the kinds of tools that will allow them to intervene and make copies of these things, to kind of create the new versions of this art. All right, so this next example is Nyan Cat genre hopping. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to stop there because I think you probably can get a sense. This starts out with this sort of vision of black and white, sort of Felix the Cat, early cat animation, moves on to the sort of Dukes of Hazzard imagery with the kind of old time music, and then the sort of Star Wars music, and then moving on here to the sort of orchestral music, giving us, again, that sort of self-referential sort of acknowledgement of the way that this video can be integrated into the culture that internet users already have some sort of knowledge of and then are trying to replay in their own kind of language. All right, so the next example is I wanted to show you to talk about the way that this is not just restricted to the United States, a global phenomenon. And what it really evokes is what media scholars call remediation. So remediation is a term that was coined by Jay Bolter and Richard Grusin in their book, Remediation, Understanding New Media. This came out right at the end of the 20th century. And they say media history, so again, thinking about that kind of way that the media history evolved in that last example, media history is not a series of displacements, I'm quoting them here, in which new media, i.e. the internet, make old media, i.e. the radio or film, obsolete. Instead, new media transform older media. Transform, I think, is the key word here, retaining some of their features while discarding others. In their own words, remediation is the way in which one medium is seen by our culture as reforming or improving upon another. It is the formal logic by which new media refashion prior media forms. So that last example, I think, is a very explicit example of remediation. This next one is about the way that remediation becomes a global phenomenon. This is the Bollywood Nyan Cat. Okay, so I love that one. And in fact, my earliest writing about internet memes was actually about group dancing. It was a video that went viral at the very beginning of YouTube, which was some Israeli Defense Forces dancers who were dancing to a song, a pop song by Kesha, while they were on patrol in the Gaza Strip. And they were actually doing an imitation of some people who had done a television skit using that same pop song on an Israeli sort of Saturday Night Live type show. And so that paper was about the way that the news media took this up because obviously soldiers doing a kind of goofy pop dance in time with each other while they are sort of occupying a territory is a very complicated social phenomenon. And so that's what I started out writing about. So that Bollywood example really sort of speaks to me about the way that synchronous movement of bodies is something that's popular within memes. Another thing that I wanted, just one more example of the Nyan Cat, then we can move on, and that is to talk about the ways that remediation sort of begins to like cast a wide net. So we can think about it in terms of demonstrating the kinds of things that people bring into memes to display of their own interests can also tell us a little bit of something about what kinds of media content cultures value. So this is our last Nyan Cat example. And then I'm going to do a really quick and incomplete sort of overview of memes as a kind of history on the internet. All right, so here's our last Nyan Cat example. Oh, I apologize. I actually apparently uploaded the wrong video. I meant to show you one where a full orchestra is playing that song. So sorry, I have the wrong video there. But you can just imagine like an entire orchestra playing the Nyan Cat song, which happened. It was not animated, it was real life. All right, so here's my very, very brief sort of overview of memes. I just want to give you a sense of the style and what they look like throughout internet history. So this is a very early example, the ROFL copter. And this is what is called ASCII art. And so ASCII is when you create an image online using just text, like the keys that you have on your keyboard. And so ROFL means rolling on the floor laughing, LOL means laugh out loud. And so this is the rolling on the floor laughing copter, right? So this is very early internet art because it is just being made before people have access to more sophisticated tools. Then this was another very popular online meme. This is just a screenshot from a video game, which was a sort of mistranslation of a Japanese arcade game. And so there's something absurd about this figure saying all your base are belong to us. I think we could also question, and I think we'll see when I talk a little bit about the rise of alt-right internet cultures, if part of the popularity of this is a kind of racism and the way that translating language is something that makes, I guess, American English speakers feel like they are smarter than other people. Nevertheless, this is incredibly popular, and the all your base are belong to us. I remember I worked for an internet company in the early 21st century, and this was like the catchphrase that everybody was using all the time at that moment. Here's another, this one is one of my favorites. This is Pancake Bunny. This is an image. And so you can see these early images from the ASCII art to the screenshot to this one. There's not a lot of intervention on the part of the people who are putting these things on the internet. It's just either typing something or putting an image on the internet. And it's not really until we get to the era of Nyan Cat where people begin to have their own smartphones, they begin to have cheap editing software, access to Photoshop, that we start to see a revolution. But the idea about Pancake Bunny was somebody originally in Japan put this on their blog, and this became the thing that you would post online, which meant I have no idea what you're talking about, so I'm going to change the subject by showing you a bunny with a pancake on its head. So I like that, again, the sort of absurdity, the kind of humor, and as I'm going to talk about in a minute or two, the cute quality of this image is one of the things that makes it a kind of resonant meme. Here's our next example. This is one of the most famous memes. Again, this is what is called an image macro, which is that, as I was saying with the Richard Dawkins example, it's an image with the text on the top. This is the I Can Has Cheeseburger cat, which sort of starts, I mean, it just sort of ignites the image macro world, and in particular, LOL cats. So LOL cats are a kind of meme which is funny cat imagery. Usually it has a sort of misspelling. It almost always has this bold font at the top. It has a cute image of a cat. There are a lot of reasons why cats are the choice for LOL cats. But to my mind, one of the primary ones, again, goes back to that sort of cultural issue, which is a lot of people have cats and a lot of people have cameras, right? So most people have smartphones. They're just taking pictures of their cats all the time. So this is something that's freely available, right? You don't have to pay any rights for it. And so a lot of early memes are of images that people take of their own cats and then add language to. Here's an example of that. I has a happy, right? So a lot of people write, when they're writing about memes, about this kind of language. It's meant to be cat language, right? And so there's this sort of idea. I think it also sort of expands the cute factor, right? So this is another very famous meme. This is Grumpy Cat. And it's hard for me not to smile at Grumpy Cat. One of the things that Grumpy Cat is an example of is, again, that sort of the economy of the internet. So the owners of Grumpy Cat put up like a photo of Grumpy Cat, and it became so viral that they were able to make money off of their Grumpy Cat content. And eventually the owners of Grumpy Cat quit their jobs and just started managing Grumpy Cat content. And so one of the things about memes is that they are a way for people to make money in the internet economy. The other thing I want to point out, and this is sort of coming from the art historical point of view, is that all of these images are very frontal, right? We have like the cat is right in the middle of the frame. There's not a lot of depth of field. The image is right up in front of us. And this is in part because early smartphone camera technology doesn't have a very good depth of field, but it's also because when people are looking at these things on a phone or looking at things on the internet, the closer it is to the picture plane, the more legible it is, right? Especially early smartphones, even before the iPhone, like when people were looking at stuff on their Blackberries, like your screen's gonna be about this big. So people are creating images that can be shared in a way that people can see them easily on the internet. So here is a kind of evolution. Once we begin having these images like Grumpy Cat, we then start to have things like Pepe. So Pepe here is a variation on that theme, right? We have this sort of central image. It's kind of cute. It's kind of amusing. It's recognizable, like this is a frog face, like those were cat faces. But this reflects a kind of shift toward more handmade memes. And the more people start creating their own memes, the more we start seeing greater variety. Another thing that I think this is a good example of is the kind of mixture of sophistication and juvenile humor, which is a kind of hallmark of memes. And the way that I think memes are interesting in part because you have to read these two things at the same time. You have to read the message of the image and the message of the text, and often they're kind of in juxtaposition with each other. So you have to have a kind of somewhat complicated ability to understand the kind of meta referentiality of the text and image relationships. So here's another example. One of the things that people start doing with image macros is that there'll be a particular image that gets a ton of different text on it. So this guy who's thinking about things, continues to this day to be a sort of popular meme. So you just yourself, you can go on and find meme generators on the internet and type in your own text. So this guy is saying you can't be diagnosed with anything if you don't go to the doctor, or there's no need to worry about your wife if you don't have a wife. You can't get fired if you don't have a job. And so I wanted to give this as an example, in part also to talk about that sort of good, the bad, the ugly. These are funny. They are like, this image is like repeated online millions of times. But to my mind, there's also something sort of racist about this, right? This sort of like, sort of Black man who is talking about ways to sort of con the world through like not having a job, not having a wife, and not going to the doctor. All right. Here are a few other image macro examples. Some people use them for sort of political ends, right? So this one, this is an image from The Matrix. What if I told you Airbnb has been contributing to housing shortages and destroyed communities, right? So memes can be used for all sorts of different functions, right? People can use them to make political commentary. People can use them to make racist jokes. People can use them to do inside jokes with friends. People can use them in order to try to make money. I think, again, that sort of Lemore Schiffman's sort of characterization of their fecundity, I think fits in well with that idea. This one I like because it's a meme about memes. And again, you know, I'm a professor. I like kind of meta commentary stuff. So here, this is about the way that memes are structured. So this is a meme that is commenting on meme structure. And so it's also commenting on the way that text works. Another thing about memes is that, and this is again going back to Lemore Schiffman's description of them not just being this specific kind of internet phenomenon, but they are also interactive ways that people do things in the world and share those ideas. So it's kind of like a fad, right? So the sort of like 21st century pet rock. This is one example of a meme. This was called planking, where people would go out and take a picture of themselves acting as if they were a plank of wood. Here are increasingly amusing examples of planking. Here's another one of my favorite memes. And again, we're getting right around to the last thing I really am going to be talking about today, which is cat videos. This is called breading cats. So this is a phenomenon where people would take pictures of their cats wearing bread crowns. And here is somebody crocheted a piece of bread to put on their cat. And I wanted to use this example because it really shows us that kind of do-it-yourself kind of quality of memes, and the way that demonstrating that you, the maker of this, have a hand in what you're making. So it's sort of acknowledging the artist behind the work by saying, not only is this my cat, but I knitted this thing. I'm acknowledging that this is a trend. I'm doing it my own way. I'm putting it out there. Okay, so I'm looking at the amount of time that we have. And I have a kind of synopsis here of ways that different people have talked about the ways that cat videos function. And so I think I will actually spend a moment showing you this. To tell you a little bit, I started first writing about cat videos around 2011. I've published 2 different essays about cat videos. And I just want to give you a little bit of background about the way that different scholars have talked about cat videos. Personally, I talk about cat videos in terms of, as I was saying, the kind of interaction of art history and film history, and the ways that cat videos reflect that. And I'll show you a very brief example of this, but I wanted to give you a sense of the way that cat videos have really been, for themselves, a kind of fecund object for scholarship. So some people have talked about cat videos as a kind of transnational visual language, because you don't need to know a particular language in order to get that a cat is cute, right? So cat videos can be shared across the globe without having to have translation. Another thing people talk about with cat videos is the cute cat theory of internet activism. And that is a theorist named Ethan Zuckerman, who suggests that internet tools like YouTube are spaces that activists can use because of the popularity of things like cat videos. Because there's so much content on there, it's harder to police what that content is, so there's more space online for activism to flourish. Of course, we've seen the reverse of this happen, which is that you can have activist content from either side of the political spectrum. So that's one of the reasons why we're seeing, or we saw over the past, I don't know, 8 years, particularly in the past 4 years, the rise of white nationalism, the rise of alt-right nationalistic content on spaces like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, etc., because there's just so much content. That's the cute cat theory. People, a bunch of psychologists and researchers at Hiroshima University were talking about cat videos as a coping mechanism for the increasing sort of technological world that we're living in. One of the theories that was one of the things that first drew me to cat videos, because I was thinking, well, obviously the reason why cat videos are popular is because cats are furry and the internet is cold and hard and people need something fuzzy. So other people have written about this in terms of the user interface of our world, that we're in these kind of places where we have all of these flattened images pushed up against the screen, and we need some relief from that. And so cat videos kind of offered that sort of relief. Some people have written about cat videos as an example of the way that we have cultural anxiety about industrial food production, and the sort of replication of cats is sort of being linked to the ways that, you know, we kill like millions of chickens every day, for example. The next example is the way that cats and cat videos reflect the kind of human politics of what it means to be a pet owner and the emotional relationship that people have to pets. My favorite writer about this is the geographer Yi-Fu Tuan, whose book Dominance and Affection. It's a fantastic book. He's such a great writer. I highly recommend his work. But he talks a lot about the kind of emotional labor that pets do for us. People have also talked about cat videos as an example of surveillance culture, the way that cats, like normalizing just filming stuff around your house and putting it out on the internet everywhere, sort of, yeah, that's a normalizing of videoing stuff going on around your house and putting it out on the internet. I like to think of it as an example of the way that production, distribution, and exhibition of mass media works in the digital age. And also I tend to think about it in terms of the evolution of film style. So what I want to do now is just quickly show you, this is a video, this is just an image of the first cat video festival, which happened in 2012 at the Walker Arts Center in Minneapolis. It's really kind of an interesting phenomenon. 10,000 people showed up to watch a curated film screening of stuff that they could otherwise watch for free on the internet. And so that's one of the things that really interests me as a film scholar, is what is it about cat videos and what is it about this sort of experience of watching things in a movie theater? Because now we spend so much time watching things on screens at home. Like, why is it that people are watching movies at home but watching cat videos at the movie theater? So that's a really interesting phenomenon. So I'm going to wrap up by doing two things. I first want to just quickly, I was going to say a little bit about the sort of rise of alt-right culture. And so I do want to just show that, those examples. So I wanted to start out with this image. Yes, I find this very sad and depressing. This is some very distressing internet content. It shows one of the ways that memes are functioning in culture right now. So yes, I has a sad about this. And it sort of starts out a little bit innocently. There was a trend for a while of cats that look like Hitler. It was very popular online. And then you might remember we were looking at Pepe earlier. So Pepe sort of shifts from being a kind of friendly frog to being a kind of image that's widely shared by anti-Semitic white nationalists online. So Pepe sort of becomes their mascot, right? So they draw images of Hitler Pepe. They make anti-Semitic memes like this one, which sort of shows a kind of characterized, a stereotyped image of a kind of Jewish Pepe smiling with the Twin Towers in the background, suggesting the sort of absurd idea that the Jews were behind September 11th. And then I have a colleague who's done some research on the circulation of Anne Frank memes, which are extremely disturbing, which are sort of like celebrating the Holocaust, right? Sort of celebrating, making a joke out of the Holocaust. And so I'm going to go back to the I has a sad while I talk about this, instead of making us look at this upsetting content, to say this is my most recent project I'm actually working on. I'm writing about the current trend, well, somewhat current, it sort of ended about 2 years ago, it's still sort of happening. There are more examples happening all the time of the so-called Hitler Rants videos, which is a video which takes a scene from a film called Downfall, which was a kind of narrative film that's meant to be a kind of realistic depiction of the last days of Hitler's life. And then they have Hitler complaining about everyday common things. And so I sort of talk about that as an example of this sort of shift. And the thing that I think is important to say here is that humor is the thing that allows that shift to happen. That things like Pepe being this sort of anti-Semitic figure is played off by the alt-right people as saying, well, it's just a joke. You can't take a joke. And that's the sort of strategy of that entire sort of corner of internet culture by saying, oh, we're not being real. It's part of the sort of double speak of the sort of fake news era. And we're seeing it show up in memes as well. So it looks to me like we're at about 15 minutes to the end of our session. I do have a compilation of cat videos that I would be happy to show a little bit of to folks if we want to see that. But I'm also happy at this point to answer any questions that folks might have. And feel free to put something in the chat, say, oh, actually, let's just watch cat videos.
So if you have any questions, please feel free to direct them in the chat. If you would like to verbally ask questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and I'm more than willing to let you ask them verbally.
Looks like Patty's saying she'd like to see some cat videos. Yes,
Cat
another
videos
request.
as well.
Okay, all right, we can easily do that.
Would you be able to make the video full screen?
Is that not full screen?
Nope.
I don't know.
It looks like the slides are on the bottom, and then the video is in the corner.
Is it full screen now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
I saw that there were some other things in the chat. I just wanted to check. What they were. I thought I would also show folks just for a second the two cat videos that I wrote about in the essay that I wrote about. So let me share my screen again. So this was the cat video that I wrote about in the in an article in Film Comments. So there are two versions of it, and I'll just play half of each so you can get a sense of the one. So when I wrote about this one, I talked a lot about the fact that you could see all these pictures of the cats in the space with the cats, and everything is pushed up towards the picture plane. And then I wrote about the way that it was a meme and the way that it was remixed in this version.
Patty cake, baker's man. Bake me a cake as fast as you can.
Dude, that's not
Hey,
roll it.
no,
That's
why'd
not
you,
roll it.
You dropped it,
You,
man.
that's not roll it.
You quit.
That's not
you,
roll it.
No, yes, it is.
No, it's
Are
not.
you serious?
No, you don't.
What's
Not.
the-
I'm not gonna do it if you don't know.
I know how to roll it. Are you
Stop.
Hold on.
You don't even. Who's that?
Creeper?
Hello, creeper.
What's good? What's good?
All right, but
Okay,
you don't know how to roll
patty
it.
cake. Let's go. Come on.
Are you-
I know.
are
I
you
know how to
gonna
roll.
roll it?
I invented it.
Are you gonna roll it?
I started it.
All right.
Yes.
It doesn't start like that.
It
doesn't.
We're
it
starting
doesn't-
over. We're
stop,
starting over.
Stop.
Okay, come on.
Stop.
Just start over.
It
Let's
starts
go.
with this part.
Easy.
Ready? Ready? Patty cake, baker's man. Bake me a cake as fast as you can. Roll.
Ow!
Oh,
Hey,
dude, what's that? What's that?
You
You
bit me.
stopped
Or so
again.
you
You
scratched
stopped
me. You got
again.
some talents,
Little
man.
baby.
Hey, don't call me a baby.
Little
Don't.
kitten.
Hey, don't call me a baby. You
Little
remember
kitten.
last week what happened when you called me a
Get
baby?
it close up.
Stop.
Dude, get it close
stop.
up.
Hey, get that camera away
Oh,
from me.
little
Stop.
baby.
Hey, that hurt.
Little
Stop.
baby.
Stop it. Don't call me a baby. Yeah.
Oh, dude, what was that? Stop. Stop.
It's payback,
Stop.
baby.
Stop.
Payback.
Just
you
stop
little
right
baby.
now.
Come on, hey, no.
Stop right
Come
now.
on.
We
Patty
don't
cake.
hit.
Let's go.
We
Patty
oh,
cake.
dude, I'm not gonna do it
All
if
right,
you
all
hit
right,
me again.
Okay.
Just stop.
Patty cake then.
Just
Patty
stop.
cake.
No.
Patty cake.
One
Come
more
on,
time?
Let's go.
All right.
Come on.
Ready?
Come on, let's go.
You ready? Patty cake, baker's man. Bake me a cake as...
Hey,
dude,
you
you're
quit. You're
getting off.
stopped.
Whoa!
I'm tired of
Dude,
quitting
stop.
like that.
Dude, I'm done.
Do not
I'm done.
quit. No
I'm
more
done.
quitting.
I'm
Patty
done.
cake.
I'm
Patty
done.
cake.
I'm
Patty
done.
cake. Come on.
It's over.
No,
It's
it's
over.
not over. It's never over.
Shut this camera off right now.
No.
Shut the
Patty
camera
cake.
off.
Patty
I'm done.
cake.
I'm
Patty
out of here.
cake.
I'm out.
Yeah, so that's what I have to say about the cat videos.
It looks like you have one question in the chat. Is media now tearing society apart?
Is media now tearing society apart? Well, that's a great question, Paul. Honestly, I think that media is reflecting society tearing itself apart. I don't think you can separate media from society because people make media, right? And media is reflecting what people are doing. So I do think that there are some structures in the way that media functions that make it harder for individual voices to be heard or for messages that are not like the main sort of right versus left, good versus evil kinds of ideas that are circulating, that main message keeps sort of dominating. But no, I don't think that that's the media. I think that's people using media to their ends. So I think if something's tearing society apart, it's society. It's a good question.
And I just want to ask if anyone else had any other questions that they wanted to put out there, or if they wanted to raise their hand to ask any questions. And it looks like you have a few comments in there that they felt that this was a delightful talk and they wanted to thank you and they felt that you had a great answer. Okay.
Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with folks. And I would say that, you know, given where we are in the world right now, that watching a few cat videos is always a good choice. Studies have shown that if you watch cat videos before having to do something difficult, like take an exam or face an unpleasant conversation, that you have more sort of brain space for doing it clearly. So yeah, that's the helpful tip at the end of the presentation.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And Leah, I want to thank you for his awesome presentation and kicking off our Hobart William Smith speaker series. And hopefully we'll see some of you next month for our next installment. And thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.